The UK Supreme Court will hand down its ruling on whether Scotland has the power to hold a second independence referendum later today.
Yeah, there's going to be fireworks, I think. The case was referred to the UK's highest court in an attempt to break the constitutional logjam, with the verdict expected to be handed down at 9:45 this morning.
Our political reporter Olivia Utley joins us now from Holyrood this morning. Olivia. Queen Elizabeth. Olivia, big day today.
Yeah, it's a very big day today for Nicola Sturgeon and her government, and potentially for the people of Scotland. And the case that was put to the Supreme Court is, would it be legal for the SNP, the Scottish Government, to hold a referendum on the independence of Scotland without the backing of Westminster? Of course, ideally, Nicola Sturgeon wants to have the backing of Westminster because that would ensure that the result would be seen as legitimate and it would be internationally recognised. But obviously, successive prime ministers in Britain have refused to do that. So she's gone down this legal route. And what the case hinges on this morning is whether the issue of Scottish independence relates to, is the word they use, a matter which is about the Union and therefore devolved to Westminster and to MPs. Any matter which is about the future of the United Kingdom can't be decided by MSPs or the people of Scotland alone. Now, the UK government's case has been that, of course, whether or not Scotland is in the United Kingdom is a case that relates to a matter which can only be decided at Westminster, i.e. the future of the Union. But the Scottish government believes that this is an impediment to Scottish democracy, and as the SNP repeatedly keep winning elections, they believe there is a mandate to hold a second referendum. Now, there are three options that the Supreme Court could pass today. There could be a UK government win, which is quite straightforward. It would say that no, the Scottish government can't pass this draft referendum bill. They can't push ahead with it. It wouldn't be legal to do so. The Scottish government could still say that they want to do a sort of poll, as it were, which has no sort of backing at all, but that raises all sorts of questions. Then there's a Scottish government win, which UK ministers think is quite unlikely, where the Supreme Court decides that this matter does not relate to an issue which can only be resolved at Westminster, in which case that would give the Scottish government licence to go ahead and publish this draft bill, although there would still be lots of questions over what happens next, because the Scottish government's argument hinges on the idea the Scottish Government hinges on the idea that this has to be decided at some point with Westminster, just not at this point. And then the third option is that they decline to make a ruling at all, which is quite possible because it's seen as a hypothetical situation. Now, what do people in Edinburgh think? I went and spoke to people on the streets last night, and here's a little snapshot.
Well, each to their own. If they really want that referendum, then let them have that referendum.
So device is the first time round. And I hated having to vote about Brexit because it was such a stupid question.
So I think if there should be another referendum now, and then once that's passed, then it should be put to bed.
I think because based on what happened from the first one, a lot's changed. And I think a lot of people's minds about how things have gone have changed with that. So I think we should deserve a second chance at least.
I would like independence, but I don't trust the current government or the Tories to actually handle any kind of separation sensibly or rationally, or I'm a pragmatist.
So it's a pretty mixed bag. People have strong feelings both ways. The argument that I kept hearing on the pro-independence side is that a lot has changed since 2014. Of course, most obviously, Britain has left the EU. But all of the other changes we've seen, from COVID to the energy shocks to the devaluation of the pound, has meant that people feel that those on the independent side feel that there is a new case for independence that wasn't there in 2014. But of course, there are plenty who feel that we are stronger together, as they said in 2014.
Olivia, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. Let's get the thoughts now of the MP and leader of the Alba Party, Neale Hanvey. Trying my best Gaelic there for you.
Good.
Look, really interesting in some of those boxes that Olivia showed us there of people in Edinburgh, one of whom saying a lot has changed since the last independence referendum, and that obviously being leaving the European Union, which we know Scotland overwhelmingly didn't want to do. Yeah. But that's not what the legal argument here is considering at all. There were 2 days of hearings in October, and that wasn't one of the subjects. This is about the competency of the Scottish Government to carry out a referendum. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think it's the wrong question to the wrong court at the wrong time. In 2014, the message was very clear. Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. And it wasn't Scotland's future in the Supreme Court's hands or in Westminster's hands or indeed in the hands of the Lord Advocate of Scotland. So that's my starting point. The promises have been made by the Scottish Government that there will be a referendum on the 19th of October next year. And it's very clear from the preamble from the Supreme Court at the time of the hearing that it is absolutely possible for any member of the Scottish Parliament to introduce legislation to hold another referendum. And that is something that can still be done. Now, whether the Scottish Government have the courage to do that or not, any backbencher could introduce that legislation, and they should. And if the Lord Advocate won't support it, then appoint a new Lord Advocate, someone who will fight Scotland's corner. But we need to see progress and ambition from the Scottish Government, which has been, unfortunately, lacking of late.
Mm-hmm. OK, so let's leap ahead and assume that this does happen and Scotland does want to go independent. What would that look like? Because would there be a hard border? Would you be reliant entirely on Brent crude, as the last pitch was? Very different times now, of course, in a net zero economy. Could Scotland actually stand on its own 2 feet economically? Oh, absolutely, of course. Of course Scotland could stand on its own 2 feet economically. I mean, independence has been won by many countries since the Second World War, particularly when the UK signed the Atlantic Charter at that time, which effectively became the UN Charter. And none of them have said, oh, hang on a sec, guys, we want to come back into the British Empire. So independence is a normal state for a country to be in. Scotland is blessed with vast wealth in terms of its resources. So at the moment... Not very PC, though, is it, to rely on fossil fuels in this current age? Just give me a second. So we will be reliant on oil and gas for other things as we go forward. If we're making electric vehicles, then oil is very important to make the plastics, the strong plastics that will be required for those vehicles. So oil and gas will continue to have a place. I have an ethylene plant in my constituency, one of only 4 crackers in Europe. So, oil and gas has a purpose beyond burning it as a fuel. But we have vast energy resources in renewables, but none of the benefit is coming to Scotland currently. So in the last 9 months, £8 billion has flowed into the UK Treasury from Scotland's oil and gas sector. 0% of that has gone to Scotland. The wind farms that we look out at off the Fife Coast, they are cabled directly to England, and that is enough energy for 2.8 million homes. Now, Scotland sees none of the benefit in terms of jobs and economic activity. The yard in my constituency lie idle. So, of course, Scotland can be a successful independent country.
OK, I mean, the dial hasn't really moved in terms of the polls, though, in spite of the situation changing with the European Union. It proves to be a hugely divisive issue, and we've seen how much the Brexit argument continues to wreak division. And there is an argument, is there not, that actually all of society wants the end of this argument, this constant debate and division and finding those things that we don't have in common. Wouldn't it be better, as the lessons in all of this be, that we are, as they say, the slogan goes, better together?
We're not. Scotland is not better together, and that is really at the core of the matter. The debate in Scotland, for most people, was not divisive. It was illuminating, inspiring, invigorating from both sides of the argument. In that last referendum, we took support for independence from 26% up to 51%, and it was only the last gasp promises from David Cameron with the vow, which none of those commitments have been honoured, that rolled the vote back to 45%. So I'm very optimistic that a further campaign would secure the support of enough to get well past 50%.
Optimism. We'll see what that result is from the Supreme Court. We'll have it live here on GBNews at 9:45. But Neale Hanvey, leader of the Alba Party, thank you very much indeed.
Very well.
Thank you very much. Got to say, I believe in democracy, and I think let them have a go. And as an Englander, I would like a vote too, because we give you a lot of money, to be fair.